All right, so I'm going to talk about this DC power supply. It's AC powered. I wanted something small that sat on my desk, and there's some bigger models out there a little more expensive. I think this cost me around $40 US to build with all the parts together. So I'll go over kind of the general design here. I've got, again, I built this to be as compact as possible so you can see how things kind of line up in here. Just enough room for everything to fit. It's got an AC to DC board here, and that powers this panel, and then that panel powers these three outputs here, and then all three of these outputs have the same voltage because they're off the same output here. As far as the overall specs go, this goes 0 to 12 volts and 0 to 5 amps, so 60 watts total. This power supply board is capable of providing 100 watts of power, so I felt like that over-engineered there was nice and safe for using with this power supply. And then I have a 80 millimeter cooling fan up top. So as far as assembly goes, you're gonna have to print your parts first. The main body is printed in this orientation. I did put supports for these two holes. Everything else I blocked out from supporters. Those could print without supports. I'm gonna print this side cover. It just prints in place like that without supports. And then the pillar, that's a third piece. I redesigned this because originally I had this pillar attached to this main body, but I busted that off and had to epoxy it in, and made me realize that it's easier to assemble this without that in place. So you actually print that now and screw that into place, one screw from this side, and then you can put your cover on and screw it onto that side. And then also I added these vents on this side as well. So after you get your body pieces printed, you can start assembling. These spring terminals and banana plugs, I put 2-inch leads on those and then tied those all together, positive and negative, and then put a short lead off that to go into this panel. This power switch here connects from the AC power. The AC power, I have one lead that runs into the AC side of the AC to DC board, and then the other lead goes through this switch to the other port for that AC power, so I could switch the AC power on and off here. And then let's see here, then I have a set of jumpers that goes from this board up to this panel. And then the fan up here is 12 volts, a 12 volt fan, so I just run it directly off these outputs as well. So the panel and the fan both have like a Y wire, two wires going in that are tied together that go into this board here. And at full 12 volts, this thing's pretty noisy and moves a ton of air. It's really not necessary for the size this is and the power that's pushing. So I went ahead and put in what's the equivalent of a 1 watt 50 ohm resistor here, and it slowed this down just enough that it's not as noisy and it still moves ample air to keep this nice and cool. Once you get that in, this cover has a couple of legs on it to keep that board from sliding out. It presses into place nicely, so even if I didn't have those, it would probably stay in place, but this just ensures that where you install it is where it stays. So once you get this cover installed here, go ahead and get this screwed on and you'll be good to go. I'm going to go ahead and power this on. And then we can go ahead and power it on here. And you'll see this panel turn on. Didn't have it plugged in all the way. It's going to turn on, and then at that point, it's not powered on yet. There's an on-off switch here, and this actually controls the output of this panel. So if I switch it on, you'll see that the voltage output is 3, but there's no load on it right now. Once you put a load on there, it'll tell you how much current it's pulling and what the wattage is. It's showing you down here what the voltage input is. That's at 12 volts coming in from that conversion board. And these are my max values up here, 3 volts at 1 amp, so it can draw up to 1 amp. So there's some really cool current limiting stuff you can do here. You can go in and set the max value at 12 volts and 5 amps, or 60 watts rather, and you can set the current limits too. So you can set this up to basically pull the max out of this AC to DC board here. In the printables page there's a link to this product page on AliExpress, and it's got a full document at the bottom of how to program this. That's about all I can think of. I did source the AC power cable from a older appliance at home, and basically have a hole back here, and there's a zip tie in there, so you insert this and you zip tie to tighten it. So you got some strain relief there. This is curved, so it's not going to cut into the jacket. But I'm pretty stoked to put this to use. I already used it for one project, and it's nice. It just sits on the table. There are some recesses in the bottom for some 10 millimeter like rubber bumpers, act like feet, keep it from sliding around too much. So hope that sheds some light if you're looking to build this. Have a good one.